thanks everyone for joining us. If you're new to APA, we're a nonprofit trade organization that's built by photographers for photographers. And well, I'm not going to just read what's on the screen here, but just say that advocacy is a huge part of what APA does. So if you're not a member, you should certainly consider joining, help out, an organization that's helping out your industry and helping out photographers. We've got a number of events coming up that I want to bring up. We've got a happy hour in 2 weeks, and that's going to be at St. Vincent Wine in DC. So please join us for that. That's on Thursday, the 16th. Then we have another 30 Minutes With event with one of our members, Hanale Lati. She's going to be talking about how she has basically created a career out of her interests, photographing nature and also dogs. So she's got some great projects and that she's done for the Smithsonian, and also a project she did was featured in the New York Times. So that'll be a really great event. Please join us for that. That's March 23rd. Then we've got, we've got very excited about in April 18th, we were going to have an evening with Art Streiber, and that's going to be a really great event. Hope you'll join us for that. Art's going to be, in addition to showing a lot of his work that we're all really familiar with and the behind the scenes stuff, he's going to talk about how he basically has built his business, how he takes in a job, from the moment they get contacted by the client all the way through to delivery, and how he works with the images afterward, to continue making money on them. So that'll be really great. I hope you can join us for that. Again, it's April 18th. And then we've got our annual field trip to the Glenstone Museum just outside of DC. And that's coming up in May. If you haven't been to the Glenstone Museum, it is probably one of the most unique museums in the world, one of the largest private art collections. And it's super incredible, definitely worth coming and checking out. Free tickets for APA members. So if you can join us for that. Want to mention, again, APA membership, you get a tremendous number of benefits, discounts. Should certainly look into that. If you're interested in a membership, you can contact us at membership@apadc.com. And trying to get to the last slide here, but having some trouble. There it is. We have a discount code, $20 off any level of membership. It's DC1 for 20. All right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Shawn. And I feel like Shawn needs no introduction if you're here. I'm gonna let him tell you all about himself. And all right, thanks so much for joining us, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Flattered you want to hear me speak, but so yeah, I just want to talk to you guys a little bit about kind of how I got started. I don't want to spend too much time on that. I could spend a long time on that, but just as a testament that you don't have to take a traditional path to get to a certain point in a photography career. And then I'll kind of get into talking a little bit more about just some of the comparing and contrasting of shooting live sports and then athletes and sports in a commercial setting. Some of it's pretty obvious, but just kind of like my take on things and how I approach things. It's not a comprehensive guide by anything with the amount of time that we have, but hopefully provides a little bit of insight. So a little bit about myself. I got started in photography in college. I originally started as a graphic design major at Penn State. And after 2 years preparing to enter that program, I didn't get in. And I kind of knew really my only options at that point were something artistic related, because I was always like the artsy kid in school. I knew I wasn't going to be a fine artist. So I had taken some photography classes, some black and white film classes in high school, and as some electives for the graphic design major. And that was just really my only option at that point. So I was like, I didn't really know what a career in photography meant. I was taking, like I said, black and white film pictures of like birds and street stuff, and Knew nothing really about like the photography industry as a whole. But that's kind of just really what I committed to doing at that point. So I didn't really have like a full-on art school education in photography either. It was mostly just black and white film, kind of fine art stuff. It wasn't really we didn't do a lot of practical, photography. So when I left college, um, I I responded to a very somewhat misleading ad for a studio photographer. And I walked in with my portfolio, with my chest proud, and it turned out to be basically like a school photography company. The best part about that place is that's where I met my wife, but that's a story for another day. But so I was like a few weeks out of college, and I was like, all right, well, this is the start, and I'll get a job, have a paycheck. And basically, I was taking pictures of kids at school and I got into like youth sports. Basically, we'd literally just like go photograph like the leagues, and then also every once in a while like we would do action photography. And that's just something that I started doing. I didn't really have any training on it. They just at the time they gave me a telephoto lens and a camera, and I started doing it. So that went on for a couple of years, and then gradually I got more and more into the action photography, and I did a lot of that. And I was doing like cheerleading competitions, football, like, and I'm not even talking about high school, no college, just like elementary school kids. So I would say it was about 2007. I was photographing a youth sports tournament, a football tournament at Baltimore Ravens Stadium in Baltimore, and I ran into a guy who I was acquaintances with from college. I asked him what he was doing. He said, I'm the youth marketing coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens. And obviously I was there taking pictures, and it's like, well, we have a team photographer, but we do have like youth events and other events that we hire like freelancers for. So, like, would you be interested? And I was like, yeah, totally. It's like, send me your portfolio. And I was like, oh shit. I don't have one of those. So, I couldn't fake that I knew what I was doing. So basically I like took pictures from that day of like little kids in football uniforms and cheerleaders. The light was good. And I made some prints and sent it to them, and they kind of shared it around the marketing department, and they enjoyed it. And so they started hiring me for like off-season events. And then going into the next season, I was shooting training camp, basically focusing all like sort of like the pageantry of everything, not on-field action, just like the fans, the cheerleaders, the experience. And then rolling into that season, kind of the same thing. Like I was a marketing photographer, so I was focusing on mostly everything but players on the field. And then I don't want to draw out the story too long, but things just kind of snowballed from there. Working for the Ravens then turned into more freelance opportunities with live sports, and then getting into commercial jobs working with athletes. So I don't just focus on sports and athletes, but that's definitely been a big part of my career. I do really enjoy it. I was a former athlete in college, not at a super high level, but I'm still do athletic stuff now. So I definitely like that world, and I kind of identify with athletes, and that's kind of where my career has taken me. So so basically today I'm just going to talk a little bit about kind of how I approach shooting live sports and then commercial sports, and feel free to, we're going to try to do questions as we go. I would hate to just sit up here and talk and ramble on for a half hour without like talking about what you guys want to talk about. So they're going to hopefully feed me some of these questions. Not about my mustache. We'll save those for the private chat afterwards. But yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I made a PowerPoint presentation, which is the first time I've ever done that. So I'm super proud of myself. I have no idea what I'm doing with PowerPoint, so forgive me, but here goes nothing. All right. I'm assuming we can all see this. So we'll talk about live sports first. I've been the team photographer for the Baltimore Ravens for the last 16 seasons. I do a lot of freelance work that involves live sports. I photographed 7 Super Bowls, 1 for the Ravens, and then 6 for the NFL. So normally with live sports, it's just me and a camera or many cameras. And that's typically how I roll. If I'm on the sideline, that's kind of how you'll see me. I'm normally working, like I said, for a team. I am the team photographer for the Ravens. It's not a full-time position, so I'm a contract worker for them. But I also have worked for other teams, like the Packers. I do other work for sports teams, the Washington Wizards, and I had a recent assignment for the New York Times Magazine covering the University of North Carolina's how they're handling NIL, which is names, name, image, likeness in NCAA sports. Typically, there is maybe like a small shot list, but in most of these situations, because it's sort of unpredictable, I'm just kind of reacting to things as they unfold and just trying to tell the story that's either been provided to me or that I think is sort of the best story of the event that I'm photographing. So leading up to, a live sporting event, ahead of time, I'm trying to think about the story. The story is always first. Am I telling the story of a specific player? Is there something going on with the team? So I'm first and foremost thinking about the story that I'm trying to approach, and then I'm using everything around me that's provided to me to sort of shape the narrative, the light, the color, composition for the story. So normally, after I figure out what story I'm telling, I always would like, we always want to photograph in good light. So if I'm at an event where I'm not providing light, then I'm trying to figure out where the light is, where it's going to be. So I know, obviously, like I want to spend as much time in that light as I can. Normally, if there's good light and just a small part of where I'm at, I'm just there waiting for someone to step into the light. If it's that good, I want to try to photograph as much as I can in good light as possible. And then I'm trying to, I'm surveying the environment that I'm in, and I'm trying to think to myself, other than like on the field or on the court or wherever, where are moments potentially going to happen? So like I'm pre-planning out where I think players are going to walk, where players are going to interact, things like that. So that I have like a Rolodex in my head of places that I know that I want to visit during certain points of what I'm doing to try to capture, action or emotional moments or whatever. As I'm doing that, I'm thinking about what's the mood of the location, what's the mood of the light, and what's the mood of the people that I'm photographing. So I'm trying to accentuate what I'm seeing. I'm not trying to sort of like add a different vibe than what the subjects are giving me or what the environment's giving me. I'm just trying to enhance it and show it to help tell the story. So I'm thinking, locations, what am I trying to show? What do I want to hide? I'm very selective about like composition and cropping. So sometimes I'll see a feature in a location and I'm just going to camp out there, and since I've already done my homework and know that, okay, players are going to come through this area at this time, I'm going to camp out here and try to make a moment where, and a lot of what I do is trying to make moments out of things that aren't really moments, like trying to make something cool out of a guy just walking, in the tunnel of a stadium. But I'm thinking about, what I want to show, what I want to hide. So, like this image is a player in a locker room, and there's many players on either side. It's very busy, very chaotic. And I'm using elements in the locker room to block out, what I don't want to see. Like this was like, there's like a table in front of him with like a rack of like gum and snacks. And this is like shooting through the gap in those two containers, try to isolate and draw focus to like this little moment that's happening amidst all this chaos. And then, so we have story, we have light, we have environment, and we have what's ultimately most important is a moment or emotion. And I'm always trying to figure out like how many of those four elements can we pack into a frame as possible. My general rule is that like you need to have at least two of those moments to make a good picture. Sometimes you can just have a moment and everything else is complete crap and it doesn't matter. But I'm always trying to layer those things into a picture, that the more that you can put into one frame, the more storytelling ability that you have. So that's kind of like the planning, what I'm thinking as I'm going into things. And then once we start shooting in these environments, live sports, typically I'm a fly on the wall. I typically don't want to be noticed. I want to just blend in the background and let the athletes that I'm photographing do what they normally do, completely separate of what I'm doing. I'm obviously not directing anyone. I have no control over what they're doing, their wardrobe, their expression. So all that stuff is sort of, out of my hands, and I'm just trying to still make good pictures just within the confines of what I have control over. And obviously, like, you're not going to really see, I don't know if I have any action photos in this presentation. That's a big part of what I do. Anyone who photographs sports, like, that's primary, right? Like, you want to get the action shot, but I've sort of built my career on these little moments in between and off to the side, and I'm just more interested in telling the stories behind the athletes, what it took to get there and the struggles they've had versus just the successes they've had on the field. Being an athlete, especially at a high level, is extremely difficult. It's not all, warm, fuzzy feelings. And that's really, even when I'm working for a team as my client, I think it's important to show the difficulties and the struggles, because if everything was easy, there would be no reward at the end. So I'm showing the process to get there and how hard it was to get there, so that when there is victory and then when there is celebration, all those difficulties, are worth it in the end. And, like, to me, like I said, the story of the athlete is just as important as the story of the game. If I'm shooting for a publication, or if I'm shooting for a team, the action is a part of what I do. Like, everyone wants the picture of the score and put it on Instagram, and that's fine. But, like, there's also people from the wire service that the team can get action photos from, but I have access. So I'm going to use the access to tell a deeper story than what you're going to see on TV or maybe from, another publication. For most of these situations, I don't have creative control. Obviously, if you know that I do stuff for the Ravens, I do have great access. But in most every other situation, I don't. And so there's moments when I do. Obviously, when the game starts and there's on-field action, I have no creative control. So the times that I can get close and move where I want to go and use different lenses, I'm always trying to do that to put my stamp of creativity on what I'm doing, to kind of make up for those moments where I really can't. What I do requires being close, and uncomfortably close normally, because I want you to feel like you're there. An image like this from, this was with probably like an 85mm lens, like this picture from, 200, 340mm lens, like across the field, whatever, just doesn't have the same impact. Like, you feel like you're right there with him. You can see the reflections in his tears. And to me, like, that just creates such a visceral response when you're, viewing photos. Because, like, my goal basically is not to make photos for the fans of the team that I'm photographing necessarily. My goal is to make sports photographs interesting to people that don't like sports. That's always been my goal. And I think that's why, like, these emotional moments and behind the scenes stuff typically has been where I've, devoted a lot of time and has gotten me, success in my career, because that's just what I've been interested and committed to doing. Again, to show, I don't want to show the same perspective of what you're going to see on TV. So I'm always just trying to be creative and show something that you're not seeing anywhere else. Another thing by getting close can sometimes create tension, which I think is a good thing. Like, I normally don't want to be noticed by players for just straight up photojournalism or documentary work, but I think knowing that I'm making marketing images and advertising images, like these little mini engagements with players, I think are really powerful. When they are giving you some emotion and you're really feeling like kind of like what they're going through in the moment. So I think that's like an added benefit of getting close. Just to compare and contrast that with some of the commercial projects that I do, it's normally a much larger crew than just me and a camera. It all obviously varies. Normally, with a lot of the live sports that I do, I really don't have a lot of creative direction. Most of the stuff that's out there is just kind of like I have the freedom to do mostly what I want to do. There may be certain players or a certain aspect of what I'm doing that the client wants to capture, but like, no one's out there creative directing me, like, on the field, like for the composition or lighting, anything like that. I have free reign to just kind of trust my gut and be creative, which is great. I have been lucky with a lot of commercial clients that I do have that freedom, but there is definitely more involvement where they're solving the client's problem, and they're typically, spending more money and want to have a bit more say in what is being created. Obviously, I'm directing talent. I'm much more involved in creating scenes and giving feedback to the athletes that we're working with. But ultimately, when we start the process, it comes down to the same thing. It's what story. Now it's not like what story do I want to tell always. It's what story does the client want to tell, or does the agency want to tell. These are a few still frames from a project that I did for photography, Tim Tatter, through his client Ready. And we followed Aaron to his Pittsburgh area home, where he has a workout room in his basement where his dad kind of taught him how to lift weights. They call it the dungeon, and he still goes back there and works out there. And so we basically we did some other stuff that was posed, but he went down in that basement and he worked out, and that was the story. Hard work pays off was the story, right? And we just let him do his thing in his environment, and that was the story that we wanted to tell. So these are just a few more frames there. Again, we had maybe one little light in the corner. It was just more about capturing that grit. I mean, this was at some ungodly ISO, and it's grainy and it's gritty and there's sweat and spit and it's gross and it's just amazing. Aaron is an incredibly, sorry, Siri's jumping in here. Aaron's a crazy, freaky athlete, and just being able to be in his element there and let him do what he does was just so authentic. And then obviously we did some pose pictures outside just to kind of finish things off. But most of what we did that day was basically just docu style run and gun. So after you figure out what story you want to tell, now you want to talk about what mood is being conveyed by the client or whoever you're working with. And you need to figure out what lighting tools do I need to have to achieve that mood. If a client wants the look is light streaming through a window, well, if you have a window that doesn't face the light and you're shooting in all day and it's cloudy, you need to have a plan for where that light's going to come from. And then once you assess the tools that you need, then I'm assessing what kind of crew do I need to efficiently move those tools around. So that's how I determine crew size, knowing that we have a schedule to keep and we need to be able to move efficiently with what we have. Because if you have the right tools and you don't have enough people to move them around and to use them, then you're not going to be able to keep up with what you need to do. So I could go on and on about lighting. So, and there's obviously a lot of things that are going to be involved with this, but this is just a few different, lighting scenarios. I do work with constant light for certain sports, strobes for a lot of what I do. That's my setup for Baltimore Ravens Media Day. But basically you have to, what's the desired look? So, is the look that it needs to be natural? This is obviously, you can see in the screen before, this is a totally lit shot. It's a shot in the lower left. But it's meant to look that as authentic to a gym, kind of not perfect, dark overhead as we can, but still being able to not be a distraction to the product that we're selling or the athlete that we're showcasing. And then obviously sometimes you're creating light from nothing and it's not about the environment and you're just kind of creating a cool look. Budget has a big factor in lighting. Sometimes there is not much budget for lighting and you're just out there with a reflector. But sometimes it's amazing what you can do with natural light and a reflector. A lot of the work that I do is really just natural light and a reflector. That's probably the majority of what I do. And then another big factor is your shot list and your schedule. So this lighting setup I get asked about a lot because it looks very elaborate, and it is. But this, everyone asks me do you need to have this lighting set up to get these pictures? And the answer is 1,000% no. I'll show you a little bit more, some behind the scenes, and I'll kind of talk about it. So that was a lighting scenario that we did for an Under Armour team sports shoot. And I'll go back to this other slide so you can see a little bit more about how we do it. But so the answer is no, you don't need 2 cranes with 12 eyes mounted on them. But the schedule that we have is shooting a lot of product in a very short amount of time. And the ability to have one person control the height of the light, the pitch of the light, the intensity of the light, and the direction of the light very quickly is very advantageous. And so, when I shoot basketball, I shoot a lot with constant lighting just because you're lighting a bigger space that an athlete can move through. It doesn't have to be pinpointed on one spot per se. And then it allows me to shoot at a lot of frames per second versus having to time everything to a strobe, which I still do. Sometimes I have to do that, and I'm fine doing that. But for efficiency reasons, it's much easier to shoot with continuous lighting. You're still getting a nice direction of the light. I'm still trying to make it feel authentic to the space that we're in. But it just gives us a little bit more leeway and efficiency in what we're doing in those situations. Another big factor with lighting is location. Am I in a location where the light's going to be changing? There's natural light going to be involved. The light's going to be changing during the day. This is from a project that I did a few years back for the uniform launch for the New York Knicks. Obviously, the client picked this giant warehouse, and it's full of windows. We're shooting all day so that we knew that we were going to have light coming in, probably if it wasn't cloudy. And then it was going to be changing because we were shooting pretty much from like late morning until the evening. So basically having to figure out where the light's going to be, how do I supplement that so it still looks authentic? But what challenges do the location present, with the lighting that we need? And so we basically started, in the morning, worked out the day, that like the edge light that you're seeing in the background, the backlight, that's the sun. And then we're supplementing with strobes. And then as the sun goes down, then we transitioned to all strobe, kind of, change the mood, change the color temperature. And the images still work together. We're selling the uniform here. So like we have the warm tones in the day and we have the cool tones for the night that play off the colors in the uniform. So that's all thought out, ahead of time. And then aside, obviously, I guess there's so much involved with lighting and crew and all that stuff, but so I can't, spend another hour on that. But, when I'm working with an athlete, whether they're a professional athlete, they're there because they have some ability of what they do. And the best way to capture that is let them do what they normally do best. Obviously, there are certain times when you have a shot list or things that you need them to do that are like outside of what they're normally doing, but the best results always happen from them doing things that they do every day. That's why they're so good at it. So like when we had this shoot with Aaron, aside from the shots that we did in his basement, we had his trainer come out and we just had him do a couple drills and things that he normally does. And that just makes capturing it so much easier because you're not having to direct them what to do. Aaron likes to lift weights, so we let him lift weights. And that's just authentic to who he is and who the brand that we're, shooting in for is. Outside of the action, a lot of athletes really aren't comfortable in front of the camera. They get like, you basically just need to tell them what to do. Here's just another behind the scenes from the shoot we did with the Knicks. Just how to tell on the screen. So athletes are told what to do all the time. Athletes are where they're at because they are coached. So they're used to showing up somewhere and someone telling them what to do the entire time. So athletes don't want to show up somewhere and you not have a plan, and then they just don't know what to do, unless it's literally giving them some instruction about like some kind of athletic move that they're doing. But they thrive on being coached, and most of the time they won't really know what to do unless you're giving them coaching. So like, as I'm doing a shoot like this, either with hand motions or what I'm telling them, I'm saying, okay, flex. Now I'm saying, point, tap your chest. Now I'm saying point to the camera, put your arms up. I'm giving them feedback exactly what I want to do. Some athletes will, freelance and kind of do things on their own a little bit more naturally. But if I'm there getting the results that either I or my client want, I have to be very specific and telling them what to do. And even in moments like this, like I'm giving them, instructions on stuff that they would normally do, like these images of Lamar, like, Lamar. These are things Lamar does during a game. So I can go and say, hey, remember that game against the Browns when you outrun everybody and put your finger up and run away? Boom. That dance you do after your touchdown? Boom. Like, so I'm coaching them, I'm telling them what to do, but it's all also stuff that they're used to doing. And then, rarely on a commercial shoot are you able to get 100% effort from an athlete. That's not always the case, but mostly, whether it's because they physically are not allowed to do it because the trainer doesn't want them getting hurt, or maybe they're coming off of a game, or they have a game the next day, so they're not always able to give you 100% effort to push the results of the photographs to that next level. I'm very invested in coaching them on expressions and kind of selling that with their expressions and their mood to kind of help take things sort of to the next level. And then once you're in the production, you have to decide what's the main focus of what you're doing. Is it the product? Is it the athlete? So like you should know that ahead of time, so you can decide what your hero is and what you need to highlight and what you need to kind of like let fall into the background a little bit. This is a shoot that we did with Warrior Lacrosse for Unconquered, and they're selling a lacrosse stick head that is water resistant. So the athlete in something like this kind of fades more into the background, and the product is highlighted. And again, you figured out what the story is, and now you're using lighting and composition to tell that story. You're not always just concerned with athleticism when you're shooting live sports. You're really just trying to capture athletes always at their peak moment. But there's so many other factors in shooting commercial sports. You do want to make sure the athlete, you have the creative control. So the athlete's got to look good. They can't have a weird expression on their face. Like physically, they need to look good and doing the actions that they're doing. Does the product look good? You have to make sure you're paying attention to that. Like obviously, live sports, you're not able to art direct wardrobe. If somebody's shirt's folded under or wrinkled or whatever, you have to just roll with it. Sometimes it ruins pictures and you just have no control. But so that's the cool thing about doing commercial stuff, is that you have control over that. It's more difficult now because you have so many other things to consider. And then sometimes, as much as we'd like to have athletes do things exactly how they do them on the field or whatever, if you're selling a product, you have to make sure the product looks good. So I'm always like tweaking form, trying to keep it as authentic as I can, but still making sure that we can see the product and whatever we've decided is the focus, making sure that that's coming through as the focus. And either way, I'm always trying to make imagery that's authentic and emotional. I mean, that's something that's that I've done throughout my career. It's just what I've naturally gravitated to. And whether I'm doing live sports or commercial sports, emotion sells product. And that's what I'm trying to capture and make it, as authentic as possible. And so just to tie everything together, whether it's live sports or it's advertising, you're still telling a story. That's got to be number one. Like people don't want to be advertised to, like they want to feel emotions. They want a good story. So that's the main goal. And other than that, it's, to create imagery that removes distractions so that the viewer can get what you're trying to put forth in the image, whether it's selling them a product or a feeling, and just remove all the distractions so they can feel that as quickly as possible. Obviously, people scroll through social media super fast. You're trying to strip away all the distractions and get right to the point.
Hey, Shawn, it's Mike. I just want to hop in real quick. We have what was that the end of the PowerPoint?
that was the end.
Okay, well, it's perfect timing. We have a ton of really great questions that we want to get to here.
I don't think I want to do questions anymore. Let's just.
They're all about the mustache. So, okay, all right. So I'm going to go ahead and bring myself back onto the screen here. And we also want to have Shawn as well. Great. All right. That was really awesome. Thank you so much. All right. So I'm just going to jump right into these. So can you talk a little bit about the copyright issues, specifically working with the Ravens and other professional teams? How does the copyright work with that? Are you able to retain some of the copyright, or
if in 2023, if you are shooting for a professional sports team, I don't care what sport it is, that team owns the images. The days of photographers owning the rights to their images, shooting for a team, are over. That's how the industry started. Photographers had tons of leverage. They owned their images and they were able to sell them otherwise. And then all the photographers that started with copyright all sold out to their teams, because eventually the teams wanted the archive of their team history. And those photographers got paid a lot of money, and great for them. But those days are over. They've been over for a while. Unfortunately, that's just the deal. Certain teams give more freedoms to photographers than others to either use the images in their portfolio, to license them commercially. That's just all from team to team. But if anyone knows anyone that's shooting a professional sports team for the team that has copyright, please let me know. But I'm pretty sure I can say with pretty good confidence that those days are over. Yep.
Understood. All right. Well, we had another question a little bit about. As a follow up to that, did the day rates increase at all when you had to give up the copyright, or how's
Well,
that?
no, I mean, so the days of the copyright ending ended before I was around. So like my day one it's work for hire.
Sure.
So that was 16 years ago. Was still day one was a work for hire.
Yeah.
So I can't answer that question with any accuracy.
Got it. All right. Did have a little question about your post-production, the kind of adjustments to, contrast, color, clarity you're making on your action photos in Lightroom, and are you able to do a lot of that when you're covering a game? I mean, how's that being handled? Are you doing that work, or are the images immediately getting shipped into the back and someone else is working on that for you?
Yeah, so I mean, every project's different. If you see a lot of my work, obviously, if you're a photographer, you know what comes out of the camera, right? And that's not what my work looks like, right? So I'm a lot of what I do is documentary work. So like it's that work that is like historical. I feel it operates in the realm of what's allowed for documentary work. Commercially, obviously, there's much more involved. So yeah, I mean, I do a lot of work. I work for my live sports stuff where it's a volume imagery. I use Lightroom exclusively just because it's the best way for me to process, to take, 10,000 images from a football game and whittle that down to 300 and process all those in 24 or 48 hours. For pretty much everything else, unless it's high ISO work, which I also still do in Lightroom because Lightroom's high ISO noise rendering is way better than Capture One. I use Capture One for it. So all my commercial work, portraits, anything that's not like hundreds of images, I'm using Capture One for. So yeah, I mean, color, contrast, clarity, all the basic stuff, just fine tuned.
Okay, interesting. And I will skip
Oh,
ahead.
no, to the second part of your question. So like, I'm not making those adjustments during the game. I like the Ravens are my only client where I'm giving images to in real time. So like they're getting like JPEGs, like small JPEGs out of my camera, either whether I transmit them wirelessly or whether they have a card reader coming. They're getting those images out of the camera with just the camera settings, and really that's what they're posting. Honestly, like the Ravens mostly just post everything on their like social media feeds, is unless it's like the advertising shoots that we do, is mostly just out of camera JPEGs. Because they like to put a look on them that suits their social media look and presence. If you look at my images on my feed, like you'll see that they look completely different. So like they typically don't use my processed images on their feeds.
Interesting. And so are you doing your own retouching work for
Yeah,
a lot of your projects? Okay, all right.
everything. Yeah, I've only out of like I think there's only been like 2 projects that I've ever done that someone else has retouched. Many times I wish that I mean, I enjoy retouching because I'm a perfectionist and I really enjoy that process. And if there's like, typically if there's like something that I'm not really good at, it's like heavy compositing, then, or, typically it's budget that has most to do with it. And typically it's either, well, I can retouch it or it's not going to get retouched. So I choose to I like to present my work in the best way possible. But a budget has a lot to do with whether we're gonna have a retouch or not. Most things I can handle, and most things I still charge for my own retouching, but it's the difference of me getting the profit off of that versus having to pay someone else, obviously.
Mm-hmm. And sticking with the action photos for a moment, we had a question. What kind of focus modes are you using, and how are you setting up your camera to catch the moments with such sharpness?
Yeah, I mean, I could, I don't want to write a sermon on autofocus modes, but I mean, I use a Canon R3 for action, and basically I don't use any tracking typically during a game because there's just too many, especially the sports that I photograph, like basketball, football. There's just way too many distractions that fools the camera. So it just doesn't work. So I typically just use a single point autofocus still. Even though there are and now other times of what I'm doing where there's like a clear background or it's practice or something where I know the camera's not going to be fooled, then I try to use, because the cameras are amazing with the tracking now, but they still can't overcome like 7 faces in one picture crossing in front of each other. So typically I'm still just using like either a single focus point in the middle or a focus point in the middle that has like a few tracking points in it. And I kind of like bounce back and forth between those depending on the scenario.
Yeah, still keeping it old school then. That's good.
Yeah, you know, like sometimes I wish I could take more advantage of the camera's capabilities, but in the situations that I photograph in, again, like with the settings, like I'm always shooting on manual, like the more control that I have, the better typically.
Sure, sure. So we've got a question here. Are there any photography or other types of digital media internships for young photographers in college who are trying to get ahead in their career, like with the Ravens or any other NFL teams? And a short follow-up to that, is there any chance for photography opportunities with the Ravens training camp this summer?
Everyone's always looking for my job. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so you know, so I'm not full time with the Ravens. The Ravens don't have any in-house photography. It's all they have an in-house broadcast team, social media, but photography is contract and freelance. So therefore, they don't have internships for it. They only have internships for departments that are full time. So there's no internships opportunities with the Ravens. I personally don't do internships because it's just more work for me than it would, you know, be a relief to me, and I just don't have really a need for it. And I can't just have people shadowing me all the time, especially most of the places that I'm going just don't allow that. But if you go to Teamwork online, Teamworks or Teamwork online, that's where like all colleges and NFLs like post their internships, and most NFL teams and most sports teams do have in-house photography departments, so they do offer internships. So that's the best resource that I know of where younger photographers can have opportunities. But unfortunately, I get asked that all the time, and there just really aren't opportunities for me to do that, specifically because it's not an in-house department with the Ravens. So it's like it has to be under their human resources, like it has to be official internship. So just for reliability and stuff, and they don't facilitate that right now.
All right, that's a great tip though. You said it was teamwork.com. Is that?
It's Teamwork. It's either Teamwork or Teamworks. I know there's people in here that know it, but I don't use it because I'm not looking for a job.
Sure. All right. And then it's kind of an interesting question that I haven't seen before. What's your diet? Like when you're photographing a game and you're covering pregame, everything else, how long between shooting do you have to eat? Like how do you sustain yourself?
I'm not going to answer that unless you tell me who it was, because I have a feeling that's a no, I'm kidding. I really don't eat much on game days. Like I'm just too busy. So like I eat really healthy because like what I eat before I leave the house has to sustain me for 5, 6, 7 hours. Obviously when I'm on like commercial stuff, you know, projects, we have snacks and crafty and food. But from when I'm like photographing a Ravens game, you know, like for a 1 o'clock game, I leave the house at like 8:30 or so. I eat oatmeal and like I eat protein, eggs. I eat stuff that's going to sustain me because like I don't have a period. If I have a break during the game, I'm going to the bathroom. Like I'm photographing stuff at halftime. Like I just don't have time to eat. And just sometimes I'll grab like a protein bar out of the locker room or whatever. And I'll pack like a little snack, but that's about it.
All right. Can you talk about your setup for working in the rain? What's your favorite go-to stuff for shooting outside and in bad conditions?
Oh, terrible. There are no good products on the market for that. Constantly trying to figure that out. I've gone from using rain covers to just going out there with nothing but like towels and trying that. I've kind of got a system now that I have some rain covers for my long lenses. It's really like because a lot of the equipment that I use is pretty water resistant. It's just like also like your phone, like you don't want to risk it, you know, like but it's technically it's meant to take abuse. So I just don't use anything that covers up like my buttons and my screens. So I've kind of shifted to like for my long lenses, I have covers that cover up the lens, and then I can flip it over my camera when I'm not shooting and then roll it back when I'm shooting, because it can get some water, doesn't have to be airtight, but basically the rain covers that exist now, that if you use them how they're supposed to use, like they cover the lens, the whole camera, and then you have to put your hands up through these like holes. So if you're just shooting with one lens the whole game, that's great, right? Because you're here the whole game. But I have 3, 4 cameras in the rain. I maybe like 3 cameras, and I have to switch to very quickly. Like for like football, in a matter of a second, you can go from a 400 millimeter lens to a 16 millimeter lens. So if I have to, I have a basically my gear is I have a camera with a 600 millimeter, a camera with a 400 millimeter lens. Then I have a camera with a 70 to 200 millimeter lens in a rapid strap across my hip, and then I have normally a 16 to 35 around my neck. Those two cameras, I need to be able to grab with my hand, touch the buttons, and shoot in one movement. So I can't put anything that's going to prevent my hand from getting in there. So I normally just risk it. Sometimes I just put a towel on the one that's around my neck and take the towel off. If it's a situation where it might, like, things might fall into my lap. So yeah, shooting in the rain's pain in the ass for sure.
For sure. All right, here's a little question about marketing. What kind of steps are you taking to market yourself to the clients you want? Are you doing promo mailers, emailers, book shows?
Yeah, I've kind of done the gamut of that. Emailers, like print mail, emailers. I've taken a break from that recently because I wasn't getting good results from it. I wasn't getting emails that were even being opened. This is like obviously through COVID, so you just we stopped sending print promos during COVID, and now I haven't really decided what I'm going to do, but I'm in a process of a big website overhaul. So like I'm actually like not trying to draw too many people to my site right now because like, I have so much new work that's going to be on there, and then I'm going to do a sort of a massive outreach. But I'm also members of Found, Wonderful Machine. I've used some others in the past, but those are the ones that I'm currently using, which is basically just like you become part of their online roster, and potential clients can go and search through photographers there, and they also send out their own emailers, stuff like that. So, and their own print stuff. So that's what I'm doing now. But I think ultimately it's like a culmination of many little things that adds to overall exposure and success versus like one thing. I haven't found one thing that just leads to like the phone ringing off the hook.
Sure. Right, here's a question. Do you enjoy shooting live sports or the commercial sports projects more, and why?
I really enjoy both. I know that like that's a cop out answer. I love photographing sports where I have no control and I'm a fly on the wall. Like that's like my bread and butter, like the realness. But because I'm a crazy perfectionist, I love the planning and the meticulous nature of the commercial work and really being able to dial all the things in that I want to dial in for live sports. So it's really like it's like half and half of who I am and what I love. I love both. I mean, I love the simplicity of going out and just showing up with a camera. Like that's really hard to beat, and be able to make really remarkable and moving images with just that. It's like, gosh, why don't I do this all the time? I don't have to like worry about like all this crew and all this this gear, because a lot of times that can get in the way, that can slow you down. But yeah, no, I love being really involved with crafting an image in the commercial space, probably just as much.
Very cool. All right. All right. Your images don't really show this, but we all have a bad day on the job. How do you go about dealing with that when that happens, and how do you stay mentally engaged?
You just move on and you take the next picture, right? Like, I mean, when I first started getting used to being a perfectionist, like in live sports, like my goal was to make a great picture of every play, right? And like that, you did learn very quickly that that's just not how it works. And I'd be really upset, not from like, I mean, I've had pretty good luck with like not screwing up and missing pictures, but like there's definitely pictures that don't happen near you and you get obstructed and you just don't have a fair shot at every picture, right? And I used to like take that really personally because I wanted to have a picture of everything, and that's just not possible. It's great when you work with a team of photographers in those situations. Like you're just responsible for what you can get, and then you trust the people around you to get the other things. But yeah, you just especially in that type of scenario, I mean, you can spend the rest of the time there like thinking about like something that you missed and then having that mood affect what you're doing, or you can just be like, all right, well, that didn't happen, now I'm going to get the next one. You just have to be mentally tough and just move on.
All right. And here's a multi-part question. How do you relate and talk to the talent on commercial shoots about bringing the elements you see in the games into a more staged environment? And also, how do you deal with the talent when they don't want to be there, and when you need to get a moment or authentic feeling shot?
Yeah, so like, I mean, I just do my homework on the athletes ahead of time. If I'm not familiar with someone, then I need to familiarize myself with them. And I just try to like, I really only need like one connection. Like I need one thing that I can, when I kind of, within the first couple minutes of talking to them, that connects us that we can relate to, and then that builds trust. So I really only need, like, if I can get more talking points than that, great. But I try to just find one, path of similarities between us, whatever it is, whether if we have kids or, just anything. And then just building on that, and then just doing that over and over again, you just learn how to communicate with athletes about different things. And it really just has nothing to do with athletes. It's just, it's anybody. If you're making a portrait with somebody, like, the main thing that you need to earn in the first 5 minutes of working with somebody is their trust, right? Because if someone doesn't trust you, or they're not getting a good vibe from you, like, they're not going to perform for you. And then leading into that, obviously, yeah, there's some athletes that'll give you everything and it's great. And there's some athletes that show up and I mean, I can't say that I blame them, right? Like, if you're, if you're focused, like, in season, focused on what you got to do, and you got to do a photo shoot, I realize, like, that's not super high on everyone's priority. So what I try to communicate to them is, like, I don't want them to look bad. I don't want them to look half-assed. Like, I want them, like, we've already agreed to be here. Normally it's because, like, they're getting paid by the brand that's there, right? So, like, their image is going to be out there, and I don't want it to look half-assed. Like, I want them to look the best. I want it to be authentic, and that normally resonates with them. And then again, like I kind of touched on before, it's okay, well, what are the physical limitations to what they're going to do, whether it's because they are allowed to do something or they just don't want to do it. So we have to operate within that. And then how can we get something authentic within the confines of doing that? Lots of times, again, like, knowing little tricks about coaching movements and expressions that can kind of, like, turn up a notch, on the authenticity or the emotion. And I mean, I've had pretty good luck with working with athletes that can give me enough to get what we need. And then sometimes, like, normally they have, like, a PR person there or somebody there from their camp. And sometimes, like, you have to talk to that person and be like, listen, like, like, we're not getting what we need, and they're not going to like what these images are going to look like. Like, can you, like, connect with them somehow? I haven't had to do that a lot, but sometimes you do have to, whether it's the client or to get into someone in their camp, to kind of be like, listen, like, this is not going to be good unless, like, you dial it up a little bit. And normally we get there, right? It's I haven't had too many situations where, like, in the final product, people are like, oh gosh, what happened? I mean, yeah, did it achieve what the vision was in my head? Maybe not, but at least it serves the purpose, and it, solves the client's problem typically.
All right. Here's a quick question back to the portfolios. You keep separate portfolios for your live sports and advertising, or do you tend to overlap them when you're showing to clients?
No, yeah, it's all overlap. I mean, obviously, if you're talking directly to a client that does, like, one thing, then yeah, I'm not going to show, like, super lit portrait stuff if they're just looking for documentary work. There's a lot of blurred lines between, like, some of my documentary work has a very commercial feel to it, and some of my commercial work has a very documentary feel to it. So, like, the lines are blurred. They're presented in, like, together in similar galleries, like on my website. My website's going to be completely different here, hopefully in the next, a couple of weeks. I know some of you have been hearing me say that for a very long time, but personal life gets in the way sometimes. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely blurred lines as far as that goes.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. We've got about 5 minutes left, so we have a lot more questions here, so I'm gonna kind of skip through a few of them here. So your still shoots, do you also cover those with video typically?
No, not typically. Like, I'm starting to get into video, and sometimes, like, we do productions that are video and stills, but I'm not just, like, showing up just to shoot video kind of for the heck of it if it's not needed, by the client. So, like, a little bit of what I do, is either me being brought on to a motion shoot or us bringing in video to a still shoot, but I don't just cover still shoots with motion.
Mm-hmm. And here's a question. Are you making unique assets for pitch treatments, or are you mostly pulling from your portfolio? And are you building lighting setups and making diagrams to give to your crew, or do you just feel it out?
Yeah, so I do test shoots for specifically geared to stuff that I want to be hired for. And normally, like, if you're already a project's being presented for, you don't typically have the time to, like, do a shoot for that project. But I do obviously do personal work and stuff like that fills gaps in my portfolio. And then, yeah, I mean, for a lot of what I do, like, a lighting diagram is, like, typically not needed. But yeah, if I'm working with a larger crew, where it's, like, lighting intensive, I most of the time will make a lighting diagram so that the crew knows what to do. and especially like moving around a location for different shots, just so everything, like you try to have everything figured out beforehand. Obviously, like your plan goes out the door sometimes when you're there in the moment and things change. But yeah, I think it's important to like have your crew know exactly what your intentions are and what we're going to do in this scenario versus that scenario, for the most part.
Okay. All right. I'm going to do three more questions here. Many venues are union controlled, such as Madison Square Garden. Have you encountered challenges working in a union venue? And if so, could you talk about how you navigate challenges like that?
No, I don't even know what those challenges like. Yeah, I haven't had situations where I would know how to answer like if there's issues with like a union venue versus a non-union venue. I don't really know. Can't really speak on that. I mean,
Okay.
obviously every location has different challenges. I don't know what they would be for, whether it's a union or not. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, basically my some things what I do, I have great access and it doesn't get in the way, and then other times I'm just like everyone else and I have no access, and it sometimes seems like people are there are like just going out of their way to make your job more difficult. And obviously you can only do what you're allowed to do, but my philosophy is like walk into a place like you've been there every day, like say hi to people, like just act like you normally walk through there, like it's no big deal, like hey, what's going on, like say hi to everybody when you're walking through and you're talking to people. And most of the time like, oh yeah, that's Fred, he was here last week, like you just have to just act like if you walk around like asking everyone questions like can I do this, can I do that, well the answer is going to be no all the time, right? So I'm much more prone to ask for forgiveness than permission. I am a rule follower though, typically, so I don't push myself too much. But yeah, you just have to. At the end of the day, you can only do what you're allowed to do, and sometimes you have to explain that to the client. Like, listen, I know we talked about this, but I couldn't be in this area, so I couldn't get that. And if that's the rules, then that's the rules.
Mhm. All right. Last two questions here. First one is, how do you approach shooting a sport that you haven't shot before?
Um, I mean, ultimately, like again, like kind of touching on what I said about doing my research on athletes, like I do my research on sports. So a great example of this is so that if any of you saw the New York Times Magazine shoot that I did, it was the cover of New York Times Magazine a couple weeks ago at UNC with basketball. That was the first time I ever shot a basketball game. So I had shot portraits of basketball athletes. I've worked with basketball athletes, but I mean, I've done youth sports, but that was the first college or, I still never shot a pro basketball game. So most of the time, like, I think it's an asset because, if you look at photographers that shoot the same sport over and over and over again, their work tends to look the same, right? Like, people tend to, cause like the requests that they get from whether it's like a wire service or whatever, like the requests tend to be the same, so you're shooting kind of the same thing. So like if I'm shooting a sport that I've never shot before, I think it's a huge asset because I have a fresh set of eyes. And ultimately, like again, like the action changes, but like techniques of what you're shooting don't change that much. I'm still looking for emotion, and shooting, from sport to sport, yes, there are nuances, right? Like shooting soccer is like much more difficult than shooting football, in my opinion. But maybe that's just because I shoot football all the time. Shooting lacrosse is very difficult. But I haven't found a situation where I've just been there and be like, oh, I can't do this. Like a lot of the, if you're familiar, you should try to familiarize yourself with the sport or with whatever you're shooting ahead of time as much as you can to see how the athletes move, see where they're taking shots from, so, like to get an overall feeling of what to expect. But that's really all I can do at the end of the day.
Mhm. All right. Last question here. It's a multi-parter here, but tell us about Banners Hockey. How did you find the story? What did you learn from shooting it? And are you sharing it with agencies that you meet with as a way to market your work? And do you have any other projects like that on the horizon?
Awesome. Great question. Yeah, so the Banners Ice Hockey Project, for y'all that don't know, it's basically a documentary project I did stills and video for a local sort of amateur youth hockey team here in Baltimore. So how I came across that project was being on Instagram and saw an Instagram story with a bunch of Black kids playing ice hockey, and I was like, that's a story. Like, I want to know more about that immediately. And so I DM'd the person who posted the story, and I was like, hey, like, this is who I am. This is the type of work that I'm doing. I'm always looking for, uplifting stories in Baltimore. Like, Baltimore gets such a bad rap. And ever since, like 2015, when things went down with Freddie Gray, like I've always been on a mission with like these personal projects to like sort of like rewrite the narrative of like Baltimore City youth and to show positive stories. And I don't know, like one project has led to the other, and that's just been kind of a unifying theme between everything. So the person that I reached out to actually was just sort of like a mentor to a couple of the kids that and young men that were on the team. But he directed me to the guy who runs the parent nonprofit, the Tender Bridge, that uses the hockey team and other sports to provide mentorship and guidance to some of these kids and young men. So I reached out to him, and he just told me about all these amazing stories of these kids. And originally I just thought like the visuals were just so striking, just because you don't see it every day. And then so I had a great conversation with him. I went out, met everybody, and sort of just I didn't really have a game plan. I just knew I wanted to document what was going on. So I started out shooting stills, and then very quickly I realized that like this story was like way beyond like the visuals that I was able to capture. It was about the stories, and I kind of realized that it was beyond what I could do with stills. So I've been dabbling in video for some years, like on and off, and I just decided like this was going to be, I had nothing to lose, and I was going to dive into shooting video and try to tell some deeper stories of that. So this is just a good way to cut my teeth and try to get more involved in video. So yeah, I did that for a couple days, and I mean the story goes on and on, but so yeah, so basically I pitched that to the New York Times last year. I actually had had tried to get some feedback on some of the images from a few people, and the feedback was like not super great, and I was like a little discouraged. So I had a relationship with one of the sports editors from the New York Times from a relationship that I built the year before, and I just sent them to her, and I was like, hey, like what do you think? And I didn't hear back from a while, so I was like, oh, she thinks it's garbage too. And she got back to me. She's like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing, like we're gonna run this, like this is gonna be so great. And it turned into a double truck full spread on the opening of the New York Times sports section. And so yeah, so I haven't pitched it openly to anybody else, but it's going to be a big part of like when I get my website done, it's going to be a big part of that. And it has led to some other things and other projects. I don't have any of those projects like in the works per se, and I'm still not sure that I'm finished with that one. But right now, my main concern is like getting my portfolio updated and getting that out there and crossing that off my list, and then we'll see what happens with the next project.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll look forward to seeing the new website. Now we all know about it. So
I have so much accountability now. Like if it goes like another month, please DM me and like say what the hell are you doing, because
right. You heard that, everyone.
Myself, I've had a lot of like a lot of personal stuff going on with my family, health wise, in the last like couple months. So I do have a little bit of an excuse, but the goal right now is like that's my number one priority.
Awesome. Well, we'll look forward to seeing it. Shawn, thank you very much for taking all this time with us, and this was awesome. And yeah, thank you very, very much. Thanks everyone for joining us. A couple things I did want to get to. I neglected to mention a couple of our events that should have been in the slides I showed earlier. We have March 25th, we're having our coffee break at the National Portrait Gallery. And April 1st, we're having an assistance workshop, all-day workshop, followed by happy hour. So please check out apadc.com for that. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And yeah, this was recorded. It will be posted on the APA community site, and we'll have that up in a few weeks. Okay, thanks so much, everybody, for being here. All right.
Thank you, Mike. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Appreciate it.